Hi, everybody.
Hi.
We're excited to see this amount of people. This is pretty awesome.
Crazy. Well, good evening, everybody. We are, according to my clock, we are at just after 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. So I think we'll get started, even though we still have a ton of people jumping on. Welcome to the first annual Prospective Student Forum. We have some esteemed colleagues joining us and friends tonight, and we so appreciate the attendance of everyone. When all is said and done, we've had nearly 400 registrants for this first meeting. We intend to do this quarterly, and we're looking at another date in late November. That way, if people have questions before your applications are due, for those of you that are applying to school this year, or if anyone wasn't able to join us tonight, our next one of these prospective student forums will be in late November. So watch for that date. This forum is being hosted by perfusion.com, sponsored by the University of Nebraska Medical Center's perfusion program. One of our goals here, though, is to not make this program specific or company specific. It's more to provide insight and information and education for current students, maybe some practicing perfusionists who might join us, as well as anybody who's just kind of heard about perfusion as a career and might want to kind of look into it and see if it's something for them. Mia, will you advance this to the next slide, please? So my name is Ben Greenfield. I'm a practicing perfusionist from Lincoln, Nebraska. I serve as an assistant professor and have been at University of Nebraska Medical Center's perfusion education program since 2003. I graduated in 2003 from the Nebraska Medical Center as well. I also serve as the director of recruiting for Epic Specialty Services, their cardiovascular unit, which is perfusion.com. I've done between 4,000 and 5,000 heart surgeries in my career, as well as well over 1,000 or 2,000 neuro and orthopedic surgeries. I specialize in regenerative medicine, bone marrow stem cells, and things, especially with the Nebraska Husker athletes. And I'm really proud of our profession, and this is one of the ways that we can give back. So I'm going to be moderating tonight, and I'm going to turn it over to a couple of our experts here in just a little bit. What I would ask, just a few things of you, since there's such a large group, if you have questions at the end, we're going to have a couple of short presentations, and then we're going to have questions at the end. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in the Q&A section of our chat. And then as we get to those, we can go through and answer those questions. And I, as a moderator, will assign those. Either I may answer some that are specific to me. If you have a specific question for Professor Sanderson or for Carla or me, please put in there, this question is for one of us. Otherwise, I'll assign them to the appropriate person I feel might be best at answering that question, or maybe simply somebody who might be tired of talking about it and might need a little bit of a break. So Without further ado, why don't we get started? We still have a few people jumping in, but I think that's probably plenty for an introduction. Mia, will you advance to the next slide for our agenda, and I'll cover a little bit about what we're going to talk about. So tonight we're going to have a couple speakers. We're going to have Professor Scott Sanderson from the University of Nebraska Medical Center's Perfusion program, and he is also part of the Directors Council. So we can talk a little bit about the different programs and admissions and things like that, up to essentially application process and graduation. Then we're going to have Carla Mall, who is been a bigwig in our profession since I was a kid in the profession. Not to date Carla at all, but she is somebody that I've looked up to a lot, has served a lot of different roles in our profession, from a staff perfusionist to a chief perfusionist to the president of AMSECT, our society, and who now serves as the vice president of cardiovascular services for Epic Cardiovascular Perfusion.com. After both of those presentations, so Carla is going to cover basically from graduation through employment and what the market and industry kind of looks like as perfusion once you graduate. And then after Scott and Carla's presentations, then we'll open up for specific questions and things like that in case any of you have things that weren't covered in the presentations. That sound good to everybody? All right. Well, without any further ado, Mia, would you advance to the next slide, please? Our first presenter tonight is Professor Scott Sanderson, Program Director and Associate Professor and Staff Perfusionist in the Division of Clinical Perfusion at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. Scott is a graduate of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the University of Nebraska Medical Center, where he earned his Master's of Perfusion Science. Scott first started practicing perfusion in Indianapolis, Indiana, where he served as a staff perfusionist at St. Vincent Hospital. He was then recruited back to Nebraska Medicine in Omaha. He continues to practice as a staff perfusionist and serve as the department clinical coordinator. And in 2013, Scott was brought on as a faculty member for the University of Nebraska Medical Center Clinical Perfusion Program, while still maintaining his full responsibilities at Nebraska Medicine. As a faculty member, Scott served in various education and administrative roles, and currently sits as the program director for the UNMC Clinical Perfusion Program, while also remaining clinically active in the clinic at the University of Nebraska, Nebraska Med. Scott is certified by the ABCP, has received over a dozen awards for his work in education, especially in simulation, is a published author, a co-editor of a perfusion textbook, has lectured at numerous national and international meetings, and Scott currently resides in Omaha with his wife, Annie, and their 3 children. Without further ado, Scott, I will turn it over to you, and I will mute myself going forward. Thanks, bud.
I appreciate it, Ben. Thank you for the kind introduction. Mia, you can go to the next slide. I appreciate the kind introduction, and I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to see all of you here. I know all of you are interested in perfusion, and I can't think of a better crew in order to kind of get you to know what perfusion is, the application process, the cultures, the schools, all of that kind of stuff. I do want to make sure and let you know, like Ben said, this is not a UNMC branded thing. This is not me talking about UNMC. This is about a full process of all of the programs, what to know, applications, all of those different types of things. Before I wanted to get in and start talking about the application process, I know we've got a few people on there who are just getting interested in perfusion in general, maybe not even close to the application process. So I wanted to take a minute and just talk a little bit about what a perfusionist is, what perfusion does. There aren't a lot of 7-year-olds that grow up wanting to be a perfusionist, and most paths that enter into perfusion enter in via different ways. You thought you wanted to go to med school or be a veterinarian or an engineer, and you kind of stumbled upon perfusion. So if that's your story, don't worry. That's a very typical story of most all perfusionists. When people think about perfusionists, what they really think about is the heart-lung machine. And that is most definitely a large part of what we do. However, perfusion has really diversified, really within even the last 15 years of our profession, to include a lot more than just the heart-lung machine. One of the things that's really important, and we'll get to it in this application talk, is that as you are applying to programs want to know, how much do you know about perfusion? Do you know what you're getting yourself into? Do you know what the job looks like? Do you know what you will see in the future? All of those types of things. So it's really important to have a good understanding of what perfusion is. Some of the things that perfusionists do outside of a heart-lung machine involve a lot of ICU work. And up on the ICU work, we do ECMO, which is extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. It's a heart-lung machine up in the ICU. We do a lot of VAD work, or ventricular assist devices, which are devices that help hearts pump. We do a lot of blood management, and that blood management is in orthopedic surgeries, neurosurgeries, ICU surgeries, trauma surgeries, cardiac surgeries, a lot of opportunities where there could be significant blood loss. Perfusionists are highly involved with those. Other things that perfusionists are involved with are oncology surgeries. We do a lot of procedures that are involved with oncology surgeries. We do a lot of procedures in the cath lab. We use a lot of devices in the cath lab, a lot of interventional radiology devices we use as well too. And what's really important to understand is that diversifies who we are. Some of the new things that are coming out are organ retrievals. Organ retrievals is a very popular thing coming into our perfusion world, where a lot of perfusionists are doing nothing but organ retrievals. Outside of those, a lot of perfusionists are involved in contract work. They're involved in ownership of businesses, administration, education, research. All of those avenues are things that take perfusionists outside of that cardiac OR. And so it's important to understand kind of what perfusionists do outside of just that. As we then lead into what our application is, I wanted to give you some, at least some heads up in regards to what you would look for before submitting your applications. There's a lot of options outside in the country. There's a lot of choices to choose. And one of the things with perfusion is that every school is a little bit different. So the first thing that I wanted to talk about is just know the source of the information that you're getting. There are a lot of sources out there that have a lot of information. One of the problems with those sources is that the people who are giving you that information are not verified individuals. And so knowing the source of the information that you get is highly, highly important. It's one of the reasons why I really enjoy doing something like this, is to be able to give individuals reliable information that comes from sources that are doing that. So knowing your source is really important. If you get information, make sure that you verify the source as well. The next thing I wanted to talk about is the prereqs. Every school has individual prereqs that they set in order to apply for those programs. Those prereqs are specific classes that you need to complete and pass in order to get and apply and meet the minimum criteria of that perfusion school. There are two things with those prereqs. One, some schools will give you course prereqs, which means you need to take human anatomy and human physiology. That would be a course prereq. Some schools give you credit hours, meaning you need 4 credit hours of human anatomy and physiology. It's important to recognize the difference as you're applying to programs, because credit hours need to be maintained and saying, I need this certain amount of credit hours in those courses, whereas coursework just means that you need to complete the courses. So looking at those two types of prereqs is important when you're looking at schools. Another important thing before you go into apply is know the dates and the deadlines of all of the schools. All schools have different deadlines. Most of them tend to end up in the December-January window, but there are some schools that do 2 admission cycles per year. Knowing the date of that is really important. Again, this goes back to where we talked about with the source. Know the source. Go directly to the perfusion program's website. They will give you the most up-to-date information about what their program is. With those dates, there are programs that utilize rolling admissions, and rolling admissions is a process where if you submit an application earlier, you get priority or have a better chance of getting your application looked at, as they would accept students in a rolling type format. There are some programs that don't do rolling admissions, meaning that if you submitted on September 5th or November 5th, they don't look at applications until after the deadline. It's an important aspect to know because if you are applying to a program that has rolling admissions, it may be beneficial for you to apply earlier compared to later. So knowing if that program has rolling admissions is important. Knowing the degree in which you will get from those programs. We have really two types of programs in the perfusion world, post-baccalaureate certificate and master's degrees. I know there's a lot of questions about master's degrees versus post-baccalaureate. I know Carla will probably touch on it as well too when we talk about jobs and all of that kind of stuff. But what's really important to understand is which one you're looking to get. For the most part, the programs are about the same length. There's some nuances here and there, but for the most part, they're about the same length, whether it's a post-baccalaureate or a master's degrees. Both of them require a bachelor's degree, no matter what. So you have to have that bachelor's degree. The difference between a master's and a post-baccalaureate in regards to jobs, most people get paid around the same. However, being able to go into leadership positions, being able to have the abilities to also manage people, go into research, go into education. There's a lot of different benefits that do offer for the master's programs. However, the post-baccalaureate certificate programs are just as successful as well in creating competent perfusionists. The last two things that I wanted to touch on, at least before you start to apply, is you need to know what model of training the program uses, and you also need to know what the cost of it is. I kind of group the model of training and the culture together a little bit. And what I mean by that is that there are some perfusion programs where they are very centrally focused, meaning you come to their school, you train at their school, you train at their hospital, and then you very rarely tend to go outside of those walls. Then there are some perfusion programs where you go and you train within their walls and you train what they see and you train at their hospital. And then you also go to affiliate hospitals outside of that as well too. Knowing the model of that training is really important because it is able to give you a better understanding of how diversified will I be as I emerge as a graduate. Also, too, networking is difference between those two. Being able to go to different sites and being able to network and do those types of things may be important to you. Or if you're at a home location and a home based, maybe that isn't as important to you because you know that's where you exactly want to be. Both of those are very important aspects to look at before you start to apply. With regards to tuition, most programs look at their tuition rates. And for the most part, outside of a few programs that may tend to be private institutes or those types of institutes, the tuition is fairly similar amongst all programs. The one thing that a lot of applicants tend to lose focus on is the cost of living also as well with that. The cost of living is very important when it comes to taking out student loans, the cost of overall, all of those different types of things. So understanding the cost of living where you're about ready to apply is just as important as well. Next slide, Mia. As we look at the map, we have a lot of different programs, and these programs tend to be where the geographical regions and geographical large populations are. As we look at those, next slide, Mia. As we look at those, you start to say, okay, I've gone through my pre-application process. I've looked at what I want, what I need, and what's going to complement me best as an applicant, what's going to make me the best version of myself, what's going to make me the best competent perfusionist. And then you look at where you want to apply nationally. And then the next thing you would do is say, okay, I'm ready to start applying. Let's go ahead and submit our applications. When we submit applications, most programs look at similar things. However, they break those things down in their admissions processes a little bit differently. GPA and transcripts tend to be a fairly common thing that most programs look at. There are things within those GPAs that tend to be maybe broken down. An example of that would be your math and science GPA or your prereq GPA. You can calculate all of those for the most part via GPA calculators. And you can say, okay, what would be my GPA in a reasonable thing? You put in your credit hours, you put in your grades, and it gives you a GPA. With that, transcripts are extremely important because GPAs need to be verified. GPAs are self-disclosed, but then also verified via transcripts. So having those transcripts sent is extremely important. We go to the deadlines of those applications and we say we need to have those transcripts in and the GPAs in order to get them verified, in order to say, here are the things that verify the GPA. With that, what we have also is that some programs will give preference factors. Preference factors meaning where you went to college, the state in which you live in. Some programs will give preference factors of types of jobs that you had before. Those types of preference factors lead you into perfusion school. Now, most perfusion programs get two types of applicants. They get applicants that are coming out of undergraduate career and applying into perfusion, or they get graduates who have had large medical experience somewhere and maybe have been out of school for a while. Both of those applicants serve the perfusion community and make very good candidates. As we look at experience, we as program directors look at those types of things and we say, we understand that a new grad can't be a nurse for 10 years. And we also understand that a nurse who's been in the CVICU for 10 years may not have taken classes. And so those experiences are based out of you. And one of the things that's really important as we look at what to know and say, well, how do we bridge that gap? Really, the applicants that stand out the most in regards to that are the people that meet in the middle. And that would be someone who has large medical experience, but has shown from a schooling perspective that they can still take the hard classes and still pass them. Or someone who is coming straight out of undergrad who shows that they can take the hard classes and can be successful, also has some medical experience as well too. Those are the types of applicants that really seem to stand out. Most programs also do personal statements, and those personal statements are submitted by you. I get a lot of questions on how can you make a personal statement good? How can you have quality statements, articulation in your personal statements? Really, you being you and allowing your personal statement to speak about you is the best advice that I give. Allow your personal statement to speak about you. Most of the time, when we're reading through personal statements, we can understand if they're a little forced, or if we can understand if it's not really representing who you are. The personal statements that really represent who you are the ones that stand out the most, outside of articulation and grammatical errors and those types of things. There's really another part to the application, and that would be shadowing and or conversation requirements. Some programs have shadowing requirements, some programs have conversation requirements, and some programs don't have those requirements at all. It's important to look at those things. Shadowing is becoming harder and harder to do in our perfusion world. And so as you look at those programs, make sure and say, okay, what is their requirement? What experience do I need to show them that I know what perfusion is? Is it shadowing? Is it talking to someone? Do they not have any requirements in regards to that? That's an important factor as well, too, because you need to make sure that you have those as you apply to these programs. And if you can catch my theme, most all programs are different. So what may work for one program may not be the requirements for the other program. References are another example where some programs have references, some programs don't have references, and those references are dependent upon how many you need and if they have sub-requirements. And a sub-requirement of a reference would be it needs to be from a person in the medical field, or it needs to be a person from your undergraduate degree, or whatever that would be. If English is not your native language, most applications and most programs do require a TOEFL score, and those TOEFL scores the minimum would be posted on those websites. I'll get to that application timeline here in a second. Mia, next slide, please. So, as we talk about, we've gone from looking at what programs you want to apply to finding the programs that you want to apply to applying to the programs. Now you're working on the application. You say, what makes me stand out as an applicant? There's a couple things that really make you stand out. Your live interview, if you get to the live interview, gives you an opportunity to stand out. And what I mean by that is that by getting to a live interview, you're able to communicate verbally with the individuals across the table from you. You can sell yourself. And most people are fairly good from a live interview perspective. The one things that really stand out the most in the live interviews is how you handle yourself under pressures, how you handle yourself in stressful environments, and most importantly, how you articulate those types of things. I'll give you an example of two applicants, and you can kind of see the difference between the two of them. Both of them give the same answer. However, if you were viewing them and saying, who would I score higher, you'd probably choose one or the other. The question could be, tell us about what you've done since the last time we've seen you in this admissions process. One applicant could say, I got a job as an anesthesia tech in an operating room. That's a great answer that gives you a lot of information about that student. The second student who has the same thing could say something to the effect of, during my last application cycle, I recognized that I needed to get a little bit more medical experience. By getting a job as an anesthesia tech, I was able to see acute care settings and operating rooms and work side by perfusionists, and it has only sparked my curiosity and love of perfusion even more. Both of those are two scenarios of students that essentially say the same thing. They got a job as an anesthesia tech, but they say it in a different way. Grades and experience are important. We talked about that. Looking at those two types of kind of applicants, being able to bridge that gap, being able to show the programs that you can cut it didactically, and being able to show the programs that you have the experience in order to provide good patient care. Perfusion knowledge is a really important thing as well too. Understanding what you are about to get into, understanding the ramifications of it, understanding the stresses of it. If you look at a traditional medical school, they bring in students to be physicians. Maybe 10% of those physicians go to do some sort of critical care setting medicine. Perfusion is very unique in that 100% of my graduates go into critical care medicine. So every single student has to be apt to know what critical care medicine looks like, the stresses, the ups and downs, all of those different types of things. And it's important for you to understand that, and also understand, what do perfusionists do outside of just the heart-lung machine. We want to get to know who you are, what makes you you. The best way to get the right people in the right seats is to understand who they are, and also to understand how you can complement who they are. Meaning, how can my program complement you, and how can my program make you the best version of yourself? Because if my program can make you the best version of yourself, you can make my program the best version of itself. And that's a symbiotic relationship that's really important. Lastly, motivation is very, very important. Being highly motivated, being able to make sure that you are motivated about the profession, motivated about the application. Being a motivated individual is extremely important. I always say, make sure and reach out to the program. I can only speak for myself, and this is probably just one time where I can only really speak for myself. I can only speak for myself, but I set time aside 4 hours every week in order to talk to prospective students. If you get in contact with the program, you'll be able to learn their culture. You'll be able to learn what they can offer you. You'll be able to see and talk to some individuals and ask them questions about their specific programs. Those are all really important things, because just as important for you to choose the right, just as much as important it is for the program to choose the right applicant, it's just as important for the applicant to choose the right program. And being able to speak to the program, being able to speak to their program representative, see what their culture is. Most students expect that all programs will give them good clinical experience, will give them adequate didactic training, will give them good faculty to student ratios. Everybody expects that, but what are the things that make your program speak to who am I as an individual and make me into the best version of myself? So I always recommend to reach out to the programs. As you can see, there's a lot of differences with the programs, but reach out to the program and talk to them. Next slide, Mia. When we get to the final part of saying, okay, we've saw what we wanted to do, where we wanted to apply, we worked on the fly, how do I stand out? And now we look at a decision. There's really 3 types of decisions that will be made in perfusion admissions. A denial, a wait list, and that wait list would have different program timelines, meaning when does the wait list start, when does the wait list end, and acceptance. If someone were to drop off of the acceptance list, they would pull from the wait list and bring up that individual from the wait list. Those are really the 3 main things. After you've reached that acceptance and you get the acceptance notification or letter, there would be a deposit that would go towards your tuition in order to hold your spot. There would be a time for you to decide, meaning the program would give you a certain amount of time to notify them if either you accept or you don't accept. They would ask for all of your vaccination records, your drug screening. They do a background check. They would check for, any international things, visas, all of that kind of stuff would all come after you've been accepted into that program. Next slide, Mia. The last thing I wanted to talk about is just now that you've been accepted, what is things that make you successful as a perfusion student? What are the things that separate you to make you at a high-end level of your class? First thing I always say is it's a full-time job. Most of your friends, while you're in perfusion school, are going to be working 8 to 5. If you treat your perfusion school like 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, just like a normal job, you're going to have success. And what I mean by that is that you're just constantly working and working at yourself. Consistent study is the next thing that makes students very successful. Studying on a consistent basis. Most of the time, when we see students falter, it's because they're studying for like 4 hours at a time and 6 hours at a time. It won't stick with you. Being able to have consistent studies in consistent ways in order to keep up with all of the material, because it is a large amount of material in a very short time, is the easiest way to success. Having perspective is another way to have success. You all are going to get into perfusion for a reason. And I know it sounds a little bit cliche and a lot of people use it, but you're here to help people. Having perspective is how we keep that consistent study and a full-time job exactly where we want it to be. What I mean by that is that as you are studying and you have the option to say, I could either go play 9 holes of golf real fast, or I could study for pharmacology. And I'll just tell you, studying for pharmacology is extremely boring. At least for me personally, it's extremely boring. Studying for pharmacology is hard. The way you keep that and the way you keep perspective is by saying, I for sure am going to keep the patient at mind. Being a reader, being a consumer of information, understanding that you have 2 routes. You got to be a didactic study and a clinical practice. You need to study your didactics, but you also need to practice your clinical skills. There's 2 roads that lead to success: didactic success and clinical success, and both of them have to be made together. Lastly, I encourage mistakes. You learn a lot from your mistakes, and there's no better time to make mistakes than when you're with me in the lab and we're doing a simulation or something like that. There's no better time to make a mistake because you will learn a lot from those mistakes. Next slide, Mia. As we look at the education and the rotations, again, there's a lot of program differences between the education and those rotations. One of the things that's really important for you to understand as an applicant too is to talk about case numbers and case diversities. Both of those are important, getting a large number of cases, but also just as important is getting case diversity, seeing lots of things, being exposed to lots of things. A cardiac case is not the same as a cardiac case. ABCP requirements allow us as educators to have to meet requirements for you. Ensure that the program is meeting those ABCP requirements. Look at what they are. Are they certified by the American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion as a simulation site? None of those are required, but it just allows you to be able to give and see the relationships between the programs. As programs, we are accredited. Most programs are accredited. The newer programs are going through phases of pre-accreditation. So understanding if the program that you're applying to is accredited is extremely important as well too. If they're not accredited and they're going through the accreditation process, where are they with the accreditation process? When would the accreditation process be done? Lastly, look at the clinical exposure and talk to them about the clinical exposure and the simulation exposure. How early do they get their students into the ORs? How do they use simulation? How do they use clinical training? Those are all really important questions to ask the programs, and it'll give you a sense of the exposures that you're going to get at all of those programs. Next slide, Mia. As we put it together, I put this last slide together just to show you that even though you may have programs, and these are just random programs that I chose, even though you may have programs that are very similar, the one problem with this is that you can see there's some very small nuances. For example, The GRE is no, except for one that's yes. One's early December, one's mid-December, one's early January. Some are course, some are credit and courses, some are credit, some are courses. Just understand the requirements. Even though it may seem like they're almost all the same, they may not be the same. Next slide, Mia. Lastly, I just wanted to thank everybody. I wanted to thank Epic for inviting me. Hopefully this was informative, at least from my perspective. I'm going to transition this over to Carla to be able to talk to you a little bit about the jobs and what it looks like as a perfusionist. But I wanted to be able to give you my email address. Again, I'm Scott Sanderson. I'm the program director at the University of Nebraska Medical Center. That's my email. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. Like I said, I love to talk to applicants. I love to be able to help them to be able to see their journey to perfusion. So that's my email. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me if you have any questions. Ben, thank you for the kind introduction, and Carla, I'll turn it over to you.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. And I can tell you all, Scott's a colleague of mine, one of my best friends, and there's not a lot of people in our profession that care as much about both the profession and the students that he brings in. He cares about them personally, and I've seen that all the way back from when Scott was a student, staff perfusionist, and all the way through. I do worry about all the hearts and clapping things that I see pop up after his presentation, because I don't want him to get a big head here. But we appreciate you doing that, Scott, and great job. Great job with that. So Scott is going to stick around with us and answer questions at the end. We have had quite a few questions roll in already. Our next presenter, her name is Carla Mall, and Carla and I get to work together now a lot. Another great friend of mine. And I joke with a lot of the people that have been around perfusion a long time. I always say, if there was a Mount Rushmore of perfusion, Carla would be on the Mount Rushmore of perfusion. She has had that kind of influence on our profession over the last 30 years. That's really, really profound. And to know Carla is to love Carla. And I really appreciate her joining us tonight too. So without further ado, Carla Mall is the Vice President of CV Services and a CCP for Epic Cardiovascular Services. As the Director of PRN Services at Perfusion.com, a leading provider of perfusion staffing and consulting services, Carla oversaw the delivery of high-quality and cost-effective care to patients undergoing CPB. She manages a team of more than 50 CCPs across 20 states, ensuring their compliance with regulatory standards, clinical protocols, and best practices. With over 30 years of experience, which is surprising, because if you look at her, you would think that there was no way.
I was at 5. I started very early.
You would not even think that would be possible. With over 30 years of experience in the field of perfusion, Carla has developed a strong expertise in perfusion, treatment, and process improvement. She has worked as a product specialist, a regional manager, a clinical director, a chief perfusionist for various hospitals, medical device companies, supporting the development and implementation of innovative solutions for cardiac surgery. She is passionate about advancing the profession of perfusion and enhancing patient outcomes through education, research, and collaboration. Carla, thank you for joining us tonight. Carla is going to take over from Scott from graduation through finding a job and kind of until you're like one of us who are starting to get towards the end of your perfusion career. So Carla, go ahead.
Thank you, Ben. Pleasure to have all of you. I am also on the advisory council for Lipscomb University. And in the past, I've been an adjunct professor at Midwestern. So we have had a big round of different experiences with students. I love students. So let's talk about the fun stuff. Mia? One more. So when to start interviewing? That has to be one of the first questions that a lot of the perfusionist students ask. And it is never too early to start interviewing. If you have a location that you know you want to go to that hospital, as soon as you get into perfusion school, let it be known to the chief perfusionist at that location that in 2 years, you're going to be looking for a job, would love to work at that hospital. You have family in the community. We always love people that are surrounded by support systems such as family members because you're less likely to leave and you've got people there that love you. So that is when we first start looking at doing the interviews. And then after you start your rotations, rotations is another place where actually we interview you. When I was a director at Washington Hospital Center, we took a lot of students. And whenever we had a job to open, the students, our current students, are the ones that we put into those positions. So, a great thing about where you go to school is also where do you want to work? You may want to find a school that has a clinical rotation in the place that you're hopefully going to get a job. Okay, so next slide, Mia, let's talk about the job search. Interviews. How do you interview? I always like to mentor any of the students that we have. We do a fake interview where they interview with me. At the end, we go over things that could have been better, questions that should have been asked that weren't. One of the worst interviews that we have is somebody who comes to our hospital and then asks me generic questions about our hospital. In today of Google search and today of all the ways that you can find out about a job, a hospital, things of that nature, do the research because if you come and ask me, do we do cabbages? Well, yes, we do, but that was also on our website. Another thing is to be prepared for a cold call. Now, Ben is a nice guy. Ben is the one that will let you know that, hey, we're going to call you at this time. Please be prepared. I'm not like that. I figure if you can't handle a cold call, especially when I was director at Washington Hospital Center, which, we do 2,000 hearts a year, very high acuity. If you couldn't handle a cold call, you probably couldn't handle our team. So always just have it in your mind before you send out an application. Know something about the hospital, know something about the team in case you do get a cold call. Appropriate attire. We've had people that showed up to our hospital in spandex. You need to dress professionally, even if you're doing a virtual interview. Wear a suit, put on a tie, put on something nice, show that you were presentable of what you would have been had you have been in public. Email addresses. Uh, I have been shocked at some of the email addresses that have been sent to me from people that were wanting a job, some of them to the point that I didn't know if it was a joke or not, so I didn't even respond. So anytime that you're sending out a job inquiry or anything like that, make sure that you have a professional email address. If your personal one is silly and funny, that's great, but get one specifically for this. We use LinkedIn a lot. So if you are a perfusion student, this is a great way for you to connect with other perfusionists at per jobs that's coming up or just to get into the network. I have a ton of perfusion students, and as soon as I see a new one, I want to connect with them because I love to be in the know of the jobs where you're looking. Can I be of help? I get a lot of LinkedIn messages from potential students asking me questions. I am more than happy to answer any of them. So LinkedIn is a great place to find other perfusionists. Goes without saying, be careful with what you post on Facebook and other social media because we do check it. And TikTok challenges, especially the ones that are face slapping, hitting each other, don't do those. We actually turned down an applicant because of a TikTok challenge that was just very inappropriate. We all know somebody that knows somebody that knows you. This is another reason why you need to treat your clinical rotation as an actual job interview because we are such a small community. There's only about 4,500 of us in the entire United States, and we all know a lot of people. So keep that in mind when you go on these rotations, because I am sure that your clinical preceptor is going to be called to ask how you did during that time. Now, some things that have happened that didn't go well in interviews. I had someone come to an interview and they had a backpack and they had a very inappropriate magazine in the backpack that fell out. So just be wary of what you take in. I had some staff members that were very offended by this. They still talk about it to this day. So just be careful of what you take into an interview. Make sure that you're not taking something that you shouldn't. Another strange encounter I had is I had a mother call me one time after we interviewed her son, and she wanted to know what time did little Robbie need to be at work, what time would he be getting off, and she was the one actually asking the interview questions. Just be wary of that because we don't like calls from your parents. We expect you to be adult enough that if you have a question about the job, anything about it, that we would be the ones talking to us personally. Next one, Mia. So there are two different types of perfusionists. You can either be contract or in-house. I have done both. I have loved both. Both of them have their pros and cons. Some of the things about being an in-house perfusionist, you can be salary, you can be hourly. Some of them have overtime pay. Some of them have call pay. It's usually a smaller group. You have more of a group feeling. I was on many different committees. People saw me as an actual employee equal to them. Another thing is you don't have to worry about your contract expiring. It gives you more security in the job. One thing that you need to make sure that you know about if you go in to be a hospital is some hospitals are unionized, especially in the state of California, DC, and New York. So if you are very anti-union or anything like that, you want to make sure that the hospital you're going to fits what your expectation is. Another thing that you have to pay attention to is the hospital mission. It may not be the same mission that you represent. We have a hospital right now that can test you at any time for nicotine. They're anti-nicotine. So if you're like to go smoke a cigar on poker night, you might not want to go to that hospital. Now, things about contract, you're usually salary. There is no clocking in and clocking out. If there's no cases, you don't have to go in. Versus in-house perfusion, if you're hourly, even if there's no cases, in order to get paid, you have to go in, clock in, do your 8 hours, and then leave. A perk about contract is you can transfer to other locations and there's more opportunity for growth. So if Ben is a perfusionist in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, and he's ready to become a chief, well, if we have plenty of chief opportunities in other locations. If you're an in-house perfusionist and you want to stay there, then you have to wait until the chief that is currently there retires or leaves. So you do have more opportunity in contract, but you have more security with in-house perfusion. One thing, if you're looking at working for a contract group that you would want to know is how long is the contract for? And how much longer would it be before it has to be renewed? So you don't want to take a job if it's only there for another 3 months and it hasn't renewed. You want to make sure that the contract is in place. Another thing to pay attention to is non-compete clauses. I know that this government has outlawed them, but still some contract groups will try to sneak them in, and it will just cost you a lot of money to fight in the court of law, and that's what they're banking on. So if you get a contract from a contract group, make sure that you read it. One of the worst things that I've had to happen, and I know that this has been a complaint by a lot of us perfusionists that hire new grads, is they come, they want the job, they want it so bad, and I say, okay, but for us to give you this job, we expect you to work here 2 years. If we're going to invest this much time, this much training, especially at a very high acuity hospital, I promise, I promise, I promise. And then 2 months later, after we've paid for you to take boards, after we've given you all this time, a job in their hometown opens back up and then they turn in their letter of resignation. So just be mindful. If you make a commitment to, and especially an in-house perfusion, keep the commitment because they could have hired somebody else. Lots of things could have happened. So that is really the big difference between the two. I have done them both. I have loved them both. They both have their pros and cons. And it's just really, I guess it boils down to what you want, if you want to be contractor in-house, or basically what options you have in the area in which you want to work. Okay, next slide. So how much do perfusionists make? This came about 4 months ago when we did a salary survey, and this is from the students that had already accepted positions. So you can see that the mean was about 142 with 14 bonus pay overtime. So the average wage was about 155,000 coming out of school. That needs to vary between pay in California is very different than pay in Biloxi, Mississippi, and it's very different from New York. So this was combined all together. If any of you are interested in the perfusion.com salary survey, we can get that to you because that will break it down into what area of the country that you're going to, tells you about what your average salary should be going into. And you also want to look at what other benefits. Some people have tuition reimbursement. Some people have relocation. Some people have sign-on bonuses. So another thing to pay attention to at the end of the day is what all of the benefits on top of the money. Next one, Mia. So student opportunities and what looks great on a resume. If I have a student, I have one position open and I have student A and I have student B. If all things are equal at the end of the day, I'm going to look at student B who pumped 500 cases and then student A that pumped 200 cases. I'm going to go with student B. Okay. But let's say all of that is equal. What would I have to go to next? I'm going to pick the student who did something above and beyond that looks great on your resume. That tells me that you're active. And we want people in our profession that are passionate and want to be active in our profession. So we do have opportunities for students. We have a Sanibel Symposium. AMSEC has a student scholarship, a safety committee student contest, the student council, Perfusion Without Borders, which is also amazing. That gives you an opportunity to go to another country to observe open heart surgery and take part of a mission. You have the Academy of Cardiovascular Perfusion Student Ambassador, and they also have scholarships. And you know, this to me really shows what kind of perfusionist you're going to be for our team, because one of the things that new grads suffer from, I call it the as soon as syndrome. They want to be active as soon as they graduate, as soon as they get past boards, as soon as they get married, as soon as they have children, as soon as, and now you're getting ready to retire and you kept putting these things off because you kept waiting for something else to happen. This is the perfect time for you to get involved. Student opportunities, it is networking. It is learning other students. You could bounce ideas. So this is just a great thing for you to have. So all things being equal, I would pick somebody who showed that they were committed and that they were involved in perfusion, which is some of these opportunities listed right here. And if you're interested in any of them, I've got the links later on in this talk. Mia? This is our Sanibel interns from this past year. We take perfusion students across the world. They have to do an essay, tell us why they want to be involved. We had UK, the United States, and Ireland represented last year. We've already got students from Kuwait, Africa. We've had a tremendous. So if any of you here are first or second year actual students, consider being one of our interns. Next. So what if you get into perfusion and you want to kind of do something else besides a chief perfusionist or a director of perfusion? Those things keep you in the perfusion department, but there's some other opportunities as well. You can be a VAD coordinator, an ECMO coordinator, clinical preceptor, program director, industry and perfusion cells, a clinical specialist. You can also become a travel perfusionist. We do not suggest that you do any of these things first coming out of school. You need to go and get experience before you can become into one of these additional resources. Mia? So some perfusionist fun facts. We are risk takers by nature. You will experience pump mares. And if you're wondering where that is, we have two types of nightmares for perfusionists. One is you're pumping air, and the second one is you have rodents that run up and down your tubes. We actually had a psychologist, Dr. Paul Friday, who did a study on the type of pump mares that you had, which helped determine what type of perfusionist you would be. Okay, your coworkers will see you in your underwear. I know that some people were absolutely shocked that we have open dressing rooms, female and male, but I wanted to make sure that you were aware of that. You will be covered in blood some point in your career, so if you have an aversion for blood being on you, well, it's going to happen. Calm under pressure, and if the perfusionist isn't happy, then no one is happy, and that is such a true statement, because if the perfusionist isn't happy behind the pump, venous drainage isn't working out, nothing's working out, then the surgeon can't sew, so nobody's happy. So you got to keep the perfusionist happy, and then the surgeon can do his thing or her thing. All right, next. So this is one of our teams, just to go to show you that we can have a good time outside of the OR. All right, Mian, the next one. Here is some of the links to the sites that we talked about. If you want, we can also put them in the chat. This goes through the different schools, the scholarships, these Perfusion Without Borders, and all different types of things that look really great on a resume. All right, Mia? All right, thank you. And here is my email address. I am more than happy to be a mentor to anyone that's here on this call or anybody that you might know, that if you have questions about what's it like to be a perfusionist, if you have questions about an interview, if you want me to give you a mock interview, I am more than happy to do that. So please just let us know what you need, because you are our next generation, and we want to make sure that we are well served. So thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Carla. As you can see, Carla's been around the block in perfusion, if you can say. She's done a lot of things and seen it from every different angle. So a huge impact on our profession, as I said earlier, and somebody who is a great resource, not only for prospective students, for current students, practicing perfusionists, and even for people like Scott and I. She's a wealth of information. Scott and Carla, thank you so much for those presentations. Hopefully you all have gleaned a lot of information and feel like a lot of your questions have been answered. I've been trying to go through the Q&A and provide some small answers to some of the questions that I could maybe answer, but we'll go through and answer some of these. And also, now that both presentations have been done, if you have questions that haven't been covered between these two, we'll be happy to get to those. Mia, here's a question for you. Sorry to put you on the spot, but we've had a couple people ask if this recording will be posted at all at any time. Are we planning on posting this somewhere?
Yes. The attendees will actually receive a link, an email with the link to the recording as late as tomorrow. So yes, they'll have access to the recording.
That sounds good. We had a few people reach out to me directly, and a couple people posted that wondering if we would have that. So thank you for doing that. Scott, there's a question in here for you that maybe I'd like you to address, and without in kind of paraphrasing, it's for those candidates that have kind of been out of school for a while, out of college for a while, and maybe no longer have a relationship with their professors, or they aren't there, and things like that. What or whom would you kind of suggest they get letters of recommendation from, or how would they go about kind of, finding people to fill that spot of a professor or something like that from undergrad for those people that have been out of college or undergrad for a while?
Great question. Thanks for asking it for me, Ben. One of the things that's really important with letters of recommendation is the content of those letter recommendations, and also who's writing the letter of recommendation. So if you are applying to a program, and just as an FYI, not all programs require letters of recommendation, but if you are applying to a program that has letters of recommendation, for those who have professional careers, I would highly advise that you seek management level individuals, whether it's in business from a management perspective, whether it's from a healthcare perspective, if there's a physician that you work with, any sort of management level-esque individuals are usually the best people to go and have write those letters of recommendation for you.
Perfect. Yeah. Thank you. Scott, why don't you, another thing, talk a little bit about, and this is kind of that area in between the two of your talks. But Scott, I think from your educational standpoint, maybe you can talk about this a little bit better. Talk about the way perfusion works, and it's different than the other medical professions in that you take a job and you work and then sit for the board exam. We've had that question come up a couple times. Talk about that process for those that don't really understand the way that works in our profession.
Yeah. One of the things that's unique about perfusion is that when you graduate, you do not become board certified. You get a degree, and we meet requirements as an education from an accreditation and from the American Board. However, you just get a degree. After that, you would get a job. Carla would hire you at Washington University, and you would work at Washington University as Carla would be your chief. During that time, perfusion has kind of a quasi-residency a little bit. And let's say I was a new grad and Carla hired me at Washington University. I would practice perfusion under her board certification. She would supervise me, and I would then meet all of the requirements that are necessary to sit for my boards. That's 40 cases under the supervision of a board certified perfusionist. Once I got those 40 cases, I could go apply and sit for my boards, and then I would take my board exams and then become a board perfusionist. I did see a question in there about how long would you precept in regards to new grads and those types of things, and Carla probably also has some opinions on that. It's very individually done, meaning that some hospitals may have certain policies, but no perfusion program is going to leave you stranded as a new grad. They're going to be there to support you. Whether it's a hospital that's supporting you or a contract group that's supporting you, those things are really important.
Yeah, thank you, Scott. I was just going to direct that to you. Carla, I want you to answer that same question from what you've seen on the people that we've gotten as new students and new perfusionists, and maybe talk about a couple of the different extremes on how long maybe somebody who's taken a job. And then also, would you answer, we had a question in here, how do you deal with difficult team members? There's probably no one I know in this that could maybe answer that question throughout your experience and things like that. So touch base on what Scott talked about preceptors first, and then talk about how you've managed your team.
Okay, so for the first question, Ben, can you repeat the first question?
You bet. So the first one was about precepting new perfusionists who are just new grads right out of school, how we go about kind of sitting with those people, making sure they're competent. And in my mind, there's no one size fits all thing, but talk about that a little bit from the workforce perspective, and then talk about how you manage your team and tough, maybe the hard to deal with team members or things like that.
Okay, so when you first graduate and you come to us, you're going to be with a perfusionist, a certified perfusionist, up until the time that you take your boards and you become certified yourself. You will never be alone. If you're going to go on call, our perfusionist would be also there to support you when you got called in. So you're going to go into a normal rotation as a perfusionist on staff, but during that time, you're going to be assigned to a perfusionist that's always there with you during this. And we always give our students, our new grads, the majority of the cases. So when our staff is doing only one case a day, you may be doing two cases a day. One, we want you to have the diversity of cases, but we also want to make sure that you have enough cases in order to sit for the boards, which you said, Scott, was 40 now. Yeah. So we want to have you up and ready. So when you take your boards and you can pass them, you can actually go into the rotation and be yourself with your own by yourself and not have to be with another team member. So that's when you really get all your experience. Uh, a lot of training, a lot of confidence building during that time too, because it's scary. The first time you come out of perfusion school, that very first time you take call by yourself, I was terrified. Back then we had pagers. And I swear I had beeper paranoia. Every 5 minutes, I would up and look at my beeper to see if my beeper had gone off. I was scared to sleep through it. So, that is some of the challenges that you go through when you first come out of perfusion school is the uncertainty, the unknown. You've never done it by yourself. Now you're doing it by yourself. And that just takes confidence building along the way. And having a great mentor and a teacher, that really sets the pace on you getting comfortable and being able to go out on your own. So difficult coworkers, well, we've all had them. The best thing to do is just go around it. Stay. The one thing I can tell you as a student, don't get involved in politics at a hospital. As a new grad, do not get involved in the politics. Stay neutral. One thing that we can't stand to hear is, well, that's not how they do it at Duke, or that's not how they do it at another hospital. Only worry about the hospital you're at because that's the way it needs to be done. So dealing with the difficult people, being in the position that I am, I have to deal with the difficult people. But as a staff perfusionist, I just avoided the difficult people and I didn't get into the passive aggressiveness. I just basically just didn't let it bother me. And I got to tell you, out of all the places that I have been and all the places I have worked, there has only been one or two. Usually, perfusionist is very team oriented. We always are there to help each other out. It's a rarity for us to see that. But I guess there's always a bad apple somewhere. So I guess you would just have to make that decision: is the job worth staying there, or talk to HR to see if that can be rectified.
Thank you for those examples. And perfusion is not unlike any other profession. There's going to be personalities and I mean, I once met a heart surgeon who didn't have the best personality and what was ironically really tough to work with. Actually, that's about all heart surgeons. Perfusion can be a really extremely stressful job, and they're under extreme stress too. A question, Scott, for you. Talk a little bit about when a student chooses a program and they're done maybe with their didactic year and start to look at clinical sites and things like that. How might or why might a student select different clinical rotation sites, or what are some of the things that might go into those selections?
One of the things that Carla kind of talked about a little bit is that the difference between contract perfusion and in-house perfusion. Within those, there's some sub categories with that, meaning, is it a large institute? Is it a small institute? What are the case numbers? What's the case diversity? And one of the best things that I can always tell students is that you don't know where you want to work until you experience it. You don't know if you want to work at a large institute. You don't know if you want to work at a large university setting until you feel it. You don't know if you want to work at a small institute until you feel it. I personally, and this is just my own personal thing, getting students into large university settings is a very important thing. Be able to see the things, get the case numbers, get the case diversity, all of that kind of stuff. But just as important too is getting them into some smaller hospitals, being able to see what a smaller hospital feels like, being able to experience those types of things. And most perfusionists don't get able to do that. They just work where they got their job. But as a student, you're able to choose those things. And I always highly recommend, especially to my students, I always highly recommend get a diversity in cases, get a diversity in numbers, but also get a diversity in cultures. Be able to see all those things and say, what makes me the best version of myself? I promise you, all perfusion programs train very competent clinicians. The difference between a competent clinician 5 years out of school and someone who may not be competent, it's not the program that you trained at. It's the environment in which you are. You either love going to work or you don't love going to work. And those are the types of things that are really important. And so as you choose your clinical sites, choose the big sites, go to busy places, get in the reps, see the diversity, see all those different types of things, but also to expose yourself to some other cultures as well.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Scott. So another question we've had in here kind of is a combination question, and I'll let the two of you rest, and I'll kind of answer this one as a whole. And it's a question about experience coming into both applying school, but then also, different jobs that you can do from a perfusion assistant and all that. We've had about 10 different questions in the chat about this. So one of the shifts, I would say, probably since some of us applied to perfusion school, is we see a lot more people coming in with medical experience who are applying to perfusion programs. Some are MDs. We've had chiropractors, nurses, respiratory therapists, and all sorts of different backgrounds. It's not absolutely necessary that you have to come from an advanced medical background to get into perfusion school. But on the other hand, being in the hospital, working in the hospital, learning the rhythms of the hospital, learning the hospital language and the special language that's spoken in the hospital only helps assure you that this is something that you want to do. And that's why schools place an emphasis on people at least having some exposure to a medical job or a medical experience. If you're an undergrad student and you're carrying a full load, that can be really, really hard to do. But there are some entry-level jobs, different techs, nurse aides, CNAs, that allow you a role in the hospital. Sometimes it's a volunteer position where you're in the hospital serving patients and serving and maybe working side by side with some of the people that may be your future colleagues. And that helps you learn the rhythms of the hospital. As far as the perfusion programs, what they place emphasis on, some really like nurses that come into perfusion or respiratory therapists. One of the things that you'll hear a lot, and this is another question in the chat, is perfusion assistants. And the question was, do companies hire perfusionists who worked as a perfusion assistant for them? Well, the answer is varied. You could have gotten a perfusion assistant and been super lazy and not showed up when your pager went off or come in. Well, do you think then the company is going to be like, man, I'm going to hire them as soon as they get out of school? Probably not. On the other hand, it may be a great job interview for you where you work for a company as a perfusion assistant, and then that company, of course, wants to bring you right back into the fold, maybe at a facility that you were working at as a perfusion assistant. How do you go about getting a perfusion assistant job? Well, there has to be a little bit of luck involved in that you happen to look at the right time on Reddit, sometimes on perfusion.com's website or an Epic job board or somewhere, and find a post of a company that's looking for a perfusion assistant or an auto transfusion job. There's really no job out there that gets you right next to a perfusionist day to day. Sometimes they'll let you set up heart and lung machines, set up circuits, prime circuits, and things like that. So it's one of the things that gets you probably the best experience about what it's like to be a perfusionist, other than being a perfusionist yourself. So hopefully that answers a little bit of that experience coming into interviews, or kind of the different ways that things can go as far as experience wise. Another question that we have is, Scott, why don't you address this one? Talk about call and how call works. And then Carla, after that one, I'm going to send one your way. So Scott, talk about call and what that means, and how that looks in different settings.
I'll take it from two angles. One, I'll take it as a student perspective, and then I'll take it as a perfusionist perspective. From a student perspective, most perfusion programs, as you're a student, will require you to take call. That means at any time a perfusionist in the hospital can call you in and have you do a case with them. Each program has call response times. For example, it may be 30 minutes or it may be 45 minutes. But as a student, you would be expected to take call. We actually, at least in my program, we take practice call. And that's where you get on call with me and I just give you calls throughout the day to get to practice what is it like to have your phone go off. I'm with Carla. I still hear pager rings in my sleep. And so that's from a student perspective. From a perfusionist perspective, there's really going to be two types of jobs and subsequent calls that you run into. You're either going to be at a smaller institute where you have less staff perfusionist and you take more call, because call has to be covered 24/7, 365. There has to be someone who is ready to do anything every day, any time of the day. So it would either be a small hospital where there's only maybe 3 members of your team and you take a lot of call. However, you don't really get called in as much. Or you could be at a large university setting or a large hospital setting where you have a large team members, where you don't take as much call, but you're almost guaranteed if you're on call, you're probably going to be working. Those are really the two types of call that you're going to run into in perfusion. And the best part about it is it kind of goes back to my answer with regards to clinical rotations. You don't know what fits you best until you experience both. And two, those things ever change. I have 3 young kids. I want to be a dad and coach basketball and do all those types of stuff. So for me personally right now, it works better to be at a large institute where I take less call, and I just plan to work when I will do that. However, my life changes and we may complement it somewhere else. But the only way you know that is by experiencing those. And so I would just, again, highly recommend that you seek those things, that you find what it looks like, you find what those jobs look like and what they entail for you.
Yeah, that's awesome, and that answers several of our questions in there too. So if you're asking questions and we don't get to your specific question, I'm doing my best to try to combine different questions so we can cover as many topics as we can. If we don't get to yours, I apologize. If we don't get exactly to your question, I'm trying to also answer Q&A and chat while I'm listening to these guys as well. Carla, here is one for you. I don't know if you've ever experienced this before. Perhaps you have. A surgeon who may not be the kindest individual once the cross clamp goes on, and how do you deal with personalities like that, with the expectations and the stress and life as a perfusionist, when maybe the people you work with, especially those in charge, aren't necessarily the nicest to you?
Mm-hmm. Well, just remember the most important person in the room. That's the patient. And so they can throw things, they can do whatever they want to do, but I don't let it affect me. I keep calm. I know what I'm supposed to do next. We had one surgeon one time that you had just to repeat back everything he said. And you know what? That was at UAB Hospital a long time ago. That's where I had trained. And I've gotten into the habit of doing that. As some people just say, yeah, okay. But if you say up on number 3, 3 up. So I think that that has worked well for me, that way that they know that I've heard them. I have done what they've said to do. We are communicating. And I will tell you that has brought down a lot of bad tempers towards me in my career, because they know that I am paying attention. I know where we are in the case. And then just by repeating back what they said, they know that I've done it. And I will tell you, Ben, that has served me well. It may not serve everybody well in that field. Everybody's got their own surgeon and ways of doing things, but it has really taken down. And I can also say that it also built up a lot of confidence in the surgeons because they know if I didn't repeat back to them, I didn't hear them. Because sometimes the operating room gets loud. Sometimes, oh Lord, we've got this one surgeon that loves listening to AC/DC wide open. And if it wasn't for the fact that I knew exactly where we were in his case, I would never hear any commands. So you have to pay attention to that. And that's another thing, Scott, that you were so right until you experience it. I saw somebody did a poll recently on music in the OR or not in the OR. I am a not person. I like to be able to hear when we're on pump. And that seems to be the time where they just like to crank it because, all the patient's physiological issues are coming to me. So I can just say from my own personal experience, I don't get emotional back. My voice never changes. It stays the same way the whole time. And I just follow what they've said, and that has worked for me. As far as having an irate surgeon, it normally calms them down because they build their trust up in you.
That's an absolute truth, Carla, and thank you for that answer. And the one thing we can almost guarantee you, if you're a perfusionist, you will deal with difficult personalities and you'll be in stressful situations. So
yes,
and you'll work with the most kind individual ever. And then when it's a stressful situation, people can change and snap because they're just under that type of pressure, and you can't take that personally. And you have to do your job. And one of the things I wanted to call attention to, and I know, Scott, you're probably thinking this too when you heard it, is Carla brought up a really important point. And it's one of the questions that Scott and I love to ask in our interviews for prospective students. And so this does answer actually a couple of the questions in the chat too. What's a great interview question that you'll be asked? Who is the most important person in the operating room? And we hear all sorts of answers. Maybe they think we want to hear the perfusionist, and then we'll hear, no, it's obviously the surgeon, even though you want us to hear the perfusionist. And never forget that the most important person in each operating room is that patient. So I'm sure, Scott, you were probably smiling at that question as I was. So for Scott, here's a question. A couple people have asked this. And I know you touched on this just a little bit in your presentation. Can you expand a little bit on the difference between a master's degree versus a certificate, or a bachelor's in perfusion, and the different levels that we still have in our schooling, and what that can mean in your career? Can you expand a little bit on that? We've had several ask that question.
Great question. And it's a question that should be asked because it's important to recognize and understand what those means as you apply to your programs. We have 2 degrees that still qualify you in order to sit for the boards and via the accreditation. That is a post-baccalaureate certificate and a master's degree. There are more master's degree programs than there are post-baccalaureate certificates nationally. Most all of the newer programs are master's degrees. I shouldn't say most, but some of the post-baccalaureate programs are already in or going to be transitioning into master's degree programs. I obviously am maybe a little biased with this question because my program is a master's degree program. So I do view and see the benefit of having a master's degree. However, I obviously don't always, there are other people who have different opinions. And again, all programs give you a quality training. For the most part, pay is fairly the same regards to entry-level perfusionists, post-baccalaureate or master's degree. Where that tends to kind of deviate a little bit is where your career paths deviate, meaning those who may have master's degrees are going to seek more management levels. They're going to seek more administration roles. They're going to seek business opportunities, those types of things. I will say, I just heard that the state of, I think it was the state of New York, but don't hold me to this, wrote into their state licensure that all perfusionists coming in needed to have master's degrees. So I think we probably may see that a little bit in some state licensures. And actually, there was a really great talk at the Academy last year by one of my colleagues, a program director, who sits on the program director council with me. They gave a talk at the Academy where a lot of us program directors are making the argument that 2.5 years is no longer long enough in order to train adequately for perfusion students. What we've seen is that when Ben graduated perfusion school and when Carla graduated perfusion school and when I graduated perfusion school, the time is still the same. The time hasn't changed. However, the diversity of what we do as perfusionists, isolated limbs, hypex, organ retrievals, ECMOs, all these different types of things have all changed, but yet our time hasn't. And one of the things that's important that Carla, as maybe a hiring manager, wants to know is, I understand you can do heart-lung machine stuff. All perfusionists can do that. But we do organ retrievals and we do isolated limbs and we do veno-veno bypasses. Can you do those things as well too? And so I personally think that we're going to see a trend definitely towards all master's programs, but also too, I do think in the future, and again, that you can go to the Academy and listen to this talk, I think that there may even be more advanced degrees in perfusion as we start to become more diversified and needing to be able to have those different types of things. Again, I'm a little biased because my program is a master's degree program, but entry-level perfusionists, whether it's a post-baccalaureate or a master's degree, are most likely going to be around the same pay, and they both will have the same access to that entry-level job.
Awesome. That's exactly true. And one of the things that Scott kind of touched on there is master's degrees have cognates. And advanced degrees have cognates, meaning there's a clinical, there's a didactic component, and each school that's a master's program will have a specific cognate. It might be a cognate of education. It might be a cognate in research. Ours at Nebraska, University of Nebraska, our cognate is in management, of healthcare management. So you come out with a master's in perfusion science with an emphasis in healthcare management. Some may be research and things like that. But what it does, it opens doors. More education always opens more doors, more job opportunities and things like that. So, Scott, thanks for touching on that. Question in the Q&A was about attending specific schools. Does it have an impact on hiring? As the director of recruiting for one of the major companies, I can say that yes, the school you graduate with, the degree you come out with does have an impact, but not as big of an impact as, is this job where you want to be long term? Is it where you grew up and you have a tie to that place? What is your interview like? I mean, if I have a choice between somebody who comes from the best school who can't communicate at all and you feel like they won't relate to the people versus somebody who is on the job trained but knows exactly what they're doing and it would be a great person to work with, you're going with the second option every single time. So I'd be lying to say that we don't look at the schools and their background and the cases that they've done and their rotations where they've been. What has their experience been in their clinical rotations? Where have they been? What are the cases they've done? All that stuff is important, but nothing like, where's their home? Why do they want to be in that place? How do they interact with our staff? What was their interview like? When we do their reference check, what did their peers say about them? All of those things matter probably a lot more than just what school you attend. At least, that's my personal opinion out of hiring a lot of people over a lot of years. That's what I would say. Carla, this question is for you. Talk a little bit about job satisfaction. What's it like to be a member of a team? What's it like to do the job that we do and to get that satisfaction? And expand a little bit on that. And then on the contrary, what are some of the difficulties? What are the emotional struggles that go into being a perfusionist that you've seen, or some of the hard things and stuff that go into that?
Okay. Well, I can tell you that I have been more than satisfied as being a perfusionist. I actually love the job, love the career. You just need to know what you're getting into as far as perfusion. It is 24/7, 365. We've always got to have somebody available for the call, like we were discussed earlier. I love perfusion because I have so many opportunities to get involved. You can get involved with MSECT. You can get involved with the Academy. You can be a speaker at some of our national meetings, such as the MSECT International, the Sanibel. We have plenty of meetings where you can go and showcase. So one of the things that I love about perfusion is the diversity. Sometimes I don't, if it's just a regular vanilla case, I may want to go upstairs and sit some ECMO. I have learned a lot about my satisfaction with the thing of sitting ECMO. One thing they don't teach us in perfusion school is how to deal with patients' families. Because if you think about it, all of our patients are asleep. We don't really pay attention about what happens or the families that they're in this waiting room. ECMO really opened up to now I have a diversity of talking to patients' families, things of that. And that really, I have truly enjoyed having that. Some of the negatives, though, I will tell you, is you're on call on Christmas and you go in. You're on call on Thanksgiving. You're on call on Easter. You don't get all the holidays. But that will tell you that is one of the things that just kind of eh is, you're waiting on Christmas morning for your kids to open from Santa and you get that call. I can tell you exactly a call that I got at UAB. It was a pediatric patient on Christmas morning. So that is the downside is sometimes you can't make plans because you are on call. Not every day, but the call matters. And one of the questions that I wanted to expand upon a little bit is I know a lot of women in perfusion because I'm on the Facebook. We have this group called Women in Perfusion. So for all the women out there, and this uh, goes for you guys as well. Can you have family? Can you have children? Can you get married? You can do all of these things. I'm going to move that. You can do all of these things and still be a perfusionist. I mean, I have two daughters. They're older now, but yes, I did all of this while being a perfusionist. I also do some travel. I'm over our travel team, and I have people that take their entire families with them as a travel perfusionist. They'll take their spouse and their kids, go around the country. So don't let things like that limit you if this is really the career you want. I've always said if it's important to you, you'll find time, you'll figure it out, you'll figure a way out to do it. But if I could go back in time, I would still choose perfusion. I absolutely would because it's very different than what it was last year. Or, I mean, sorry, a decade ago versus now. Now, just like Scott said, we have so much emergent technology. And if you're a geek like I am with this stuff, this is a great place to be because I am learning all sorts of different things. And that's one of the things I really love about our job is it's not status quo. It's not monotonous. Every day is a different day. It's a different patient. It's just always changing. And that is one of the things that has brought me the most satisfaction with this profession.
Great insights there, Carla, and spot on. For all of us have families,
Mhm.
and being around our kids and spouses in some sense, some of the time, our spouses may disagree, but we all, we have families and lives and things like that too. And the work-life balance and being able to be a part of our kids' lives and things like that was really important to us. And one of the reasons all of us chose perfusion as a career, for sure. So that's some great points. Scott, two questions for you. They're both school related. One was why or how did you get into education, and kind of what was your career path that led you into education? That's one. But then also a question we've had a couple people ask, and this is a question we get a lot when we have prospective students that call us or that come into interviews, and they have shown a pattern. And that is they have a low GPA their freshman, sophomore years of college. And then that GPA gets a lot better as they learn what they want to do and, they figure out how to study, and basically they grow up. Sometimes people go back to school and retake courses, or their GPA improves a lot. What would you tell those people, or how do schools look at those people that have a really low GPA those first, maybe that first year, that first semester, but then show an upward trend in their GPA? So why'd you get into education, and what's that path? And then talk about GPA trends.
Well, great questions. Before I answer that, I want to make sure that I'm holding myself accountable to know your sources. I checked in New York State. They do not have that requirement right now. So just as an FYI, they don't have that. But my guess is that people were trying to talk about it to try to get it to be there. So know your sources. I check my sources as well, too. To answer Ben's questions first, I got into...
Hey, Scott, I hate to interrupt, but can you join the debate later? And be their source checker, so we make sure that everything that's said in the debate is correct and stuff like that. So
I'm gonna stick with perfusion.
Okay, that sounds good. That sounds good, bud. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
Here, from my own personal perspective, one of the things that got me into education was my father. But the second thing that got me into education is that I realized that my influence into individuals, the success of them, their families, the ripple effects, all of those things exponentially grew as I started to educate people. Every day I would take care of 1, 2, maybe 3 patients. But then what I realized is that if I can train competent individuals to go change communities and be able to serve individuals and be able to bring home moms and bring home dads and bring home children, that my ripple effects in communities that I never even knew and people that I never will meet, that would be something that was extremely large. It's the one thing that really got me into education. And so I continue to have that as I teach, and I keep that perspective even as a program director of my ripple effect into communities and individuals that I will never meet, but hopefully I can play a part in changing their lives. The second question with GPA. GPA is always a really big question because some programs look highly at GPA. Some programs look less at GPA. But one of the things that I always recommend with GPA is this: know the minimums. Every program has a minimum GPA that you have to have in order to apply to that program. The second thing is that if your GPA is lower, meaning it's towards the lower end of that minimum, saying it's closer to the minimum, let's say the minimum is a 3.0. That's a pretty average GPA for most all programs, a 3.0. Let's say that your GPA is a 3.1. And you're wondering, well, what happens with the 3.9s and the 4.0s? Most programs, what they want to see is they want to see those trends to show them that you can take hard classes. There are hard classes in perfusion that you need to be able to pass. No matter what, if you don't pass them, you can't be a perfusionist. So retaking classes. When we look at GPA, some programs will replace those grades. Some will not. Some will average them together. That's an important aspect to know when you're applying and you look at programs. 2, some programs break those down, meaning that you may have an overall GPA of a 3.1, but your math and science is a 3.8, or vice versa. You may have an overall GPA of a 3.8, but your math and science is a 2.8. Those are things that you need to look at and say, okay, what classes do I need to retake? Here's my things if you need to retake classes. Make sure that you are strategic in what classes you're retaking, meaning it doesn't make sense to retake a 1-credit course. A 1-credit course just really isn't going to change your GPA that much because you're dealing with large numbers of credit hours. GPAs are calculated based off of the grade and the credit hour in which you do, meaning a 5-credit course as an A has a more significant impact on your GPA than a 1-credit course as an A. So look at the credit hours. 2, make sure that you're taking strategic courses. If your program looks at math and science, prereq, and overall GPA, those are the 3 GPAs they look at. Well, in order to get the most bang for your buck, retake a course that applies to all 3 of those. So maybe it's an anatomy course. That would get your math and science GPA up. It would get your prereq GPA up because it's one of their prereqs, and it would get your overall GPA up. That's a way for you to strategically look at a course and say, this course would improve my GPA across all of those spectrums. The last thing, make sure you take retake a class that you can get a better grade in. If you get a C+ in organic chemistry and you're like, I don't know if I can get higher than a C+, retaking it and getting a C doesn't do you any good. It only sets you back. So make sure that you retake courses that are strategic in credit hours. Make sure you take courses that are strategic in the GPAs that your programs are looking for, and make sure that you retake a course that you know you can get a better grade in.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, Scott, for handling both of those. And Scott is a fantastic teacher. And honestly, one of the reasons that I got into teaching and chose Nebraska Medicine Perfusion program over medical school was Scott's father too. And Scott knows that. And he was one of my mentors as well. I'm going to handle one of the questions on here that's it's been asked several times in several different ways. And Scott or Carla, you can chime in on it if you have any insight as well. This kind of covers all of our areas, but it's about school sizes, class sizes, and salary growth, and kind of the way that's gone over the course of history. Keep in mind that perfusion is a market, and it's a market driven by numbers of heart surgeries primarily, and a few other different types of surgeries and life support things and organ system retrievals and all the different things that go into a perfusion market. And while most job markets are very cyclical, like for instance, in nursing, you see a huge glut of nurses and then salaries drop down, right? And then all at once, salaries are low. And so then people aren't going to nursing school. And all at once, then you get a trough. And now all at once, you can't find nurses. And so then the salaries start going up. And you get this cycle of never ending peaks and troughs in the job market. Perfusion is a small enough career that there's a little bit of a policing of this effect so that we don't get those peaks and valleys quite so much. And it's an organization between the schools and the employers and the hospitals. And while supply and demand is still there, our goal is to not flood the market with perfusionists, because then salaries tank and people can't find jobs. But on the other hand, we have a certain number of patients that we have to treat, and we have to have a certain number of practitioners. So people like Scott, the other directors of the programs, are constantly looking at the data and trying to figure out, how many schools do we need? How many perfusionists do we need to graduate each year to replace those retiring and keep up with the patient demands? So that kind of answers, I hope, a little bit of, how many schools there are. We have some new schools coming online here in the year or 2 years. We also have seen some schools close over the last 5 to 10 years, and class sizes have been variable depending on funding at different institutions and things of that nature that's going to affect any profession. The question about salaries and salary growth, we've seen a salary growth in perfusion fairly steadily for about 15 years. Prior to that, there was about a 5 to 10 year gap where salaries actually declined. Prior to that, we kind of saw that cyclical change. There are a few things that have changed in the last 5 to 10 years salary growth. One is inflation in our economy. So though we've seen salary growth in perfusion, it's mirrored the change in our economy in some way with inflation. So you may see about a 15 to 20 to 30% increase in salaries over a 10% or over a 10-year period of time. But in reality, that's just mirrored inflation in our economy. So really, those salaries have grown. In perspective, they haven't changed a lot. Salaries are, though, on the higher end, especially for new grads coming out, than they have been really at any other time in this profession. Carla showed a slide earlier, but it's not uncommon on the coasts or in bigger cities at bigger institutions for new grads to be starting north of $150,000 to $175,000 in some cases when you take into account the full gamut of the way they're paid. Conversely, in rural America, where you have a small cost of living and a small hospital, you may see a perfusionist making $110,000 or $115,000, but they may work 15 hours a week and have an unbelievable work-life balance. And where they live it's a great salary and a great quality of life. So it all depends kind of on where you want to be and what you want your life to look like and what you want your work-life balance to look like. Scott or Carla, any comments kind of on what you've seen throughout the course of history or what you know about the schools or things like that?
Mia, if I take control, can I show a slide?
Sure. Yes, you can.
While Carla's pulling that up, I'll speak a little bit to just kind of the history for a second and what so the PPDC is the Perfusion Program Director Council, and for the first time about 4 years ago, we published data with the American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion, and it shows how many perfusion students are graduating each year versus how many certifications of perfusionists are lost, meaning the retirement or the leaving of the field. That data is there. You can get it. If you just go to the American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion's website, you can see that data and see how many are coming out versus how many are getting lost. One of the things is all of these questions are very, very good questions, and they should be questions that you're asking them. And I always say that every generation has these questions which they should ask. The person who trained me and was my mentor in perfusion school, I sat across from his desk and I said, "What's the job going to be like? What's the job market going to be like?" And he smiled at me and he said, "When I was in your shoes 35 years ago, I asked the same question. And now here I am as a program director, and 35 years later, people are asking me the question, what's the job market going to be like?" So those are not bad questions to ask. They're good questions to ask. You just need to look at the data, and the data is out there for you. And for us, Carla can show you, those trends tend to be up.
Can you see my screen? You can? Okay, because I don't see my screen on here.
Yeah.
You can see that we just did a perfusion survey, salary survey. The perfusion.com used to do it pretty much every other year. We stopped for a quite significant time, but this is 2024. So salaries from 2010 at the top tier have increased by 70%. And another question that was asked about your caseload and the money. Let me go down to right here. Can you see this? Okay. So you can see what your median salary is for the lower Midwest, the Pacific Northeast, and how we got up with these versus the years of experience. Years of experience, you can see the difference between a new grad universally versus somebody with 20 plus years. Now, this is all together. You're going to find the places in New York, California, that's going to be a lot higher, but this was just all ramped together. Another thing that is interesting was the caseload. Here is about how much people were worked. We have people making $140,000 that work less than 15 hours a week. And then we broke down to what a real perfusionist, normal perfusionist, I won't say real, what a normal perfusionist actually does. So you can see that usually the more hours that's worked, that's normally your universities, your higher acuity, because you're doing a lot more cases, higher the pay. We also went into the hours paid worked. We broke it down into gender, title, and age. So yes, salaries are increasing. I can tell you because Ben and I are on the recruitment committee. We haven't tapped out yet. We still have a huge need of perfusionists. The economy plays a huge role in how much we need. Economy gets better, more retire. They're wanting to retire. Then we need more students to replace. We saw that in 2008 when the people that were supposed to retire didn't. And then they waited, then the economy got good, and then we lost about 30% because they all retired at one time. We want to try to avoid that, which is how difficult it is to predict all the things that goes into the prediction of how many perfusion students need to graduate in order for us to keep doing cardiac surgery, if that makes sense.
Yeah, It totally does. This is great data. So, um, all the way back early in my career, perfusion.com was kind of the leading source of doing this perfusion salary survey. And there was about a 10-year gap where perfusion.com no longer kind of did this salary survey. And we've just recently brought it back this year with the very first one in about 10 years. And it's worked great. We had, I think, 1,000 perfusionists across the country do this survey, right, Carla? And
Yep.
I think now that, when the results come out and things like that, the next iteration, which I think will be every other year, maybe,
Yep.
we'll probably get 2,000. And the goal is to have well over half of the perfusionists participating in that perfusion salary survey, because that's the way we kind of get the data and get it back to the people so that they can find and see these trends in our profession. So yeah, really, really cool. We've had a question repeated numerous times about sharing the presentation and sharing and the recording and stuff like that. And Mia has answered a few of these. We'll be sharing the recording and the slides and things like that with your email for those who registered. You should get that later on. So don't fear if you've missed part of this. You should be able to get this. Another question we've had, and I've tried to answer it a few times, but I think it's good for everybody to hear. And Scott, this one is for you. Talk about our class mix and people that have come, straight from undergrad, those that have taken a few years, had a different career, did something different. I've had a couple people in the chat ask, is it frowned upon to take that time in between? Do you like people coming straight out of undergrad? Talk a little bit about, the class makeup, at least from what we've seen, and, the different types of students that have come into our programs.
Most programs nationally have kind of a culture with them. And what I mean by that is that they tend to create classes that look similar to previous classes, meaning very heavily on academics, or very heavily based off of experiences, or very heavily based off of live interview techniques, all of those different types of things. So most programs tend to kind of have that niche that they have. When you look at yourself and you say, okay, well, this is what I have, most admissions committees are going to look at your experience through the lens of who you are. And what I mean by that is that it's very unfair to think that someone coming straight out of undergrad should have 10 years experience as a nurse. It just won't happen. That does not happen. It's impossible for that individual to do that. And so admissions departments and program directors look at that through the lens of the applicant. I'll use that as an example. Someone coming straight out of undergrad. Well, an option would not be go spend 10 years being a nurse, because that's just not feasible. However, it may be go be a nurse aide in the ICU, or maybe go to be a nurse aide in the operating room, or in the CVICU, or something like that. Those are the types of things that people would look at from an experience perspective. Most program directors want to create a cohesive class where you have a diversity of the individuals in your class, meaning individuals who have been nurses on a CVICU and ECMO coordinators, paired with individuals who are coming straight out of undergrad that have great grades and some medical experience. That's usually the makeup of most perfusion programs, where you get a large diversity of what you see.
Great. Thank you, Scott. I've been trying to go through the Q&A, but we've had well over 100 questions. If you don't feel like your question has been answered, if we've overlooked it or something like that, please put it back into the Q&A so it comes up to the top. I've tried to kind of mix some of the questions together and provide answers and look for questions that have been asked multiple times. But if you don't feel like your question has been answered, please put it in at the top. Or if you have a question, we have about 6 or 8 minutes left to answer some questions and go from there. With that being said, we are going to do this quarterly. We're going to try to do this again in late November. If you feel like if you missed some of the presentation, or if you feel like maybe you had other questions or things like that, we're going to try to do this quarterly, because all of us have prospective students reach out to us at different times throughout our days, throughout our weeks, and we love to give our time to the prospective students and give back to our profession in this way. And that was one of the reasons why we hosted this forum in the first place. So know that if you've missed anything tonight, or if you want to participate again, you're welcome again. We're looking at late November. We'll get a date out and post that again. Scott, we've had this question a couple times, and again, what is a program that's new but not accredited yet? What does that process look like? What is graduation, being able to sit for the board exam, employment opportunities? What does that all look like for a lot of these new programs that are popping up? If you know what that looks like.
The accreditation process is a long process. It usually takes more than a year. So if you're applying to a program that's not accredited, the first thing that you need to understand is it conditional? Are they under some sort of conditional accreditation, meaning that they're going through the accreditation process, they just haven't fully completed it yet? For the most part, those programs will be able to offer you and tell you, we've been able to say from the accreditation that if you graduate from our program, that you will be deemed that you've graduated from an accredited program. The American Board of Cardiovascular Perfusion has a requirement that in order to sit for the boards, it has to be from an accredited clinical perfusion program. Those programs that are still seeking that accreditation, they will have a designation from the accreditation that says, as we go through this process, if you bring in students, they will be deemed graduated from an accreditation perspective or not. And so it would be highly important to reach out to the program directors or to the programs themselves and say, you're going through the accreditation process. Can you allow me to know that if I graduate, that it would be deemed from an accredited program?
Awesome. Hopefully that answers some of the accreditation questions. We've had another question about shadowing, and shadowing has gotten exponentially harder since COVID. Obviously, hospitals shut down during COVID and refused to let anybody into the hospital that wasn't an absolute necessary personnel. That's been tough to reopen different institutions to get people in. They also increased the age to 18. They won't let people in under the age of 18 for various reasons. So schools have adapted a little bit. And so Scott touched on this on his presentation a little bit, and I'm going to have him go into it a little bit again, and we can give you UNMC's perspective, because we have changed from shadowing cases to perfusion conversations and attending things like this and gathering information. Scott, can you talk a little bit more on shadowing and getting in versus having maybe a career as a tech or a volunteer opportunity in a hospital, and how maybe getting a volunteer opportunity in a hospital where you're in there maybe will help you shadow because you have a name badge and stuff like that, and how there are ways that people can still get in and see perfusion from the inside. And it's really more about talking the talk in an interview and knowing that you know what you're getting into. Go ahead, bud.
There are programs that require you to shadow, and those programs have certain amount of numbers of shadowing cases that you need to do. You would then fill out a log and submit it with your application. There are some programs who don't require anything, and then there are some programs that require you to talk to perfusionists. And you would fill out a log and say, I talked to this perfusionist and I asked them these questions, and you would fill that log and you'd fill it out. That's kind of the plethora of what you'll see from a program perspective. The programs that tend to have shadowing put that as a requirement. You cannot apply if you don't get those shadow numbers. So when we look at shadowing, first you got to look at the program, and two, that can tell you a little bit about the program themselves. But if a shadowing is a requirement for you, sometimes it's very difficult to find shadowing opportunities, particularly if you live in a country a part of the country that maybe doesn't have access to that type of heart programs or a program that allows you to shadow. So the best way to find shadowing opportunities is to become, honestly, an employee of the hospital, meaning that you work as a nurse aide, or you work as a dialysis tech, or you work as a phlebotomist. Most of the time in hospital, shadowing is allowed. Now, if you find that shadowing is very difficult and you find that shadowing leaves you not able to succeed in that, then you need to look at also programs too that don't require that. UNMC, my program, we do not require shadowing. And the reason why we don't require shadowing is just because I felt like it was too difficult as an applicant in order to get into these environments. And so look at programs that maybe don't require those shadowing things. Most of the time, if a program requires shadowing, they will allow you to come shadow at their hospital. And so that's where you can usually get those shadow opportunities. But it's important to know that the most important thing about the shadowing, the conversations, or whatever it is, it's definitely about those. But the admissions committee wants to know, what did you learn? What did you see? What was the things that you felt like were hard? Did you understand what you were doing versus just going in and watching it, or versus just going in and asking blank questions? They want to know, did you get the experience that you want? And it's less about the shadow or the conversation. It's more about, how are you articulating that? What did you learn? And how can you apply that to be a good perfusionist?
Awesome. Thank you, Scott. I'm going to give, we have 2 minutes left, or a minute left. I'm going to give kind of Carla first, you, and then Scott, closing statement. Give us a 30-second to a minute closing statement here about, kind of why you're so passionate about perfusion, and why, kind of give us your spiel about why this is the best profession ever. You're muted, I think. Carla, you're muted.
To me, it's the best profession is because I have so many opportunities and there's so much diversity, and I hate monotony. So having something different each day, looking forward to something unique, I learn something on this job. This isn't a job that you're learning numbers and it's the same numbers, you do accounting. This is something that I learn something every day. It may even be something minute, like from a patient's family. But I just love the opportunity, and I work with some pretty amazing people. And the teamwork also brings a lot of satisfaction to me because I have a great team. So I highly recommend perfusion school for all of you, that if you are a risk taker, you kind of are like a little geeky nerd when it comes to innovative technology, likes to be in the thick of things, this is a great career for you. If you are one that can't take criticism well, if you are one that gets very upset if somebody raises their voice, you can't think good on your feet, you lack self-confidence, this is probably not the right field for you. Because like Ben said, there's some surgeons that are not so nice, then there's some other physicians and other people that are not so nice as well. And when things get tense, people's bad behaviors sometimes come out. So just know who you are, because the ones that can just embrace the suck, they're the ones that rock it, So that's my spiel.
Awesome. Thank you, Carla. Scott, how about you?
Well, I wanted to thank everybody for being here, and Carla and Ben, I want to thank you for inviting me to the forum to speak. I really hope that all of you got some good information with it. Really, my motivation is to make sure that the sources that you're getting information from are reliable sources that give you good information. Reddit boards and all these things, they're great, don't get me wrong, but knowing the source is so important to be able to recognize being a good applicant. I want to offer my thanks to you, Ben and Carla, and like I said, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I want to make sure that we put in as much effort into you as an applicant as you are into the programs. And so if you have anything, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Perfusion is a wonderful career. It has allowed me to be a husband and a dad, a friend, and I've changed a lot of lives in the process. And perfusion has changed my life for the better. And if I had to do it all over again, I would do it. So make sure and reach out to me if you have any questions. And again, thanks everybody for being here.
Yeah, to reiterate that, thanks to all. We had 400 people sign up for for this forum. Absolutely amazing. And it's a testament to Scott, you and Carla, that you are both a part of this. Two of the very big wigs in our profession. To sum it up, I once heard a statement that if you find a job that you love and you're passionate about, you'll never work a day in your life, because they're probably not hiring in that field. And that's not the case in this, because there's jobs aplenty. And I think you can tell that the three of us are very, very passionate about what we do, and about giving back to the profession, and about replacing ourselves someday with perfusionists better than ourselves. So we appreciate you all being here tonight. If you want to join us again in late November, we're going to do this again. And if you have any questions specific for any of us, feel free, please reach out. We're better via email sometimes than phone, as we're in cases or ECMO or other things like that. But you'll hear from us eventually here. Thank you all for being here. Have a great night. Tune into the debate. That comes next. Hopefully that's a little bit more intelligent than this, but I doubt it's going to be.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all.